I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step.
Just let go.
We're changing it up this week. We have a special type of episode. It is a live recording of a conversation around pivoting your career. I was recently in New York City at the Riveter Summit, and we had a colorful conversation around this topic. Not only pivoting your career, but pivoting your message, pivoting your life. My fellow panelists include Jen Hatmaker. She is the best-selling author and also the host of For the Love podcast. Also, Tiffany Dufu, who is the author of the book Drop the Ball. She's also the founder and CEO of The Crew. John Lippman, who is the CEO of Book of the Month Club. And Tiffany Liu, who's the VP of SAP IO. And the panel was moderated by Erica Keswin, who is a best-selling author, a workplace strategist, and founder of the Spaghetti Project. And I realize we talk a lot about career shifts on this podcast, and the whole why not now question often applies to considering doing something else with your career path. So that's why I thought this conversation would be great to share with you. So without further ado, let's go. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. Oftentimes, you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Poopery, the original before you go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Poopery have literally taken the smell out of you-know-what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit poopery.com, and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code WHYNOTNOW. That's all one word. And you can hear the story about Poopery in our interview with founder Susie Batiste. That's Why Not Now episode 28. Poopery is also available at Target.
Okay, so we're going to start with introductions, and you all can introduce yourselves much better than I can. So I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany and, tell everybody who you are.
My name is Tiffany Dufu. My life's work is advancing women and girls, and right now I get to execute that purpose as founder and CEO of The Crew. Our algorithm matches circles of 10 women who collaborate to meet their life goals together, and I see a couple of crew members in the audience, so I'll get up and give hugs later. Thank you for having me.
That's awesome. Look at you. I'm Jen Hatmaker, and I am an author, and I'm a speaker and a teacher, and I host a podcast called For the Love. My life's work is also to serve women, and I have done that traditionally and originally from a faith space. And so I have had some really interesting pivots in my career that I look forward to talking about a little bit that were more ideological in nature, and then thus had real effects on my work. So I love my work. I love what I do. I live in Texas. I've been married for 25 years and I have 5 kids. So I'm real happy to be here. Yeah.
I love it. As a new mom, I totally vibe with that. My name is Amy Jo Martin, and I help women get through the pivot process, really. I've had 3 big pivots, excited to talk all about this, and they've all been transformative. I am a author, speaker. I have a podcast called the Why Not Now podcast, and run a program called the Renegade Brand Bootcamp, where we help women, oftentimes who are going through this process of transition, build their personal brands, share their story, own their voice, and really learn how to make an impact. So I look forward to this discussion, my favorite topic.
I'm John Lippman. I'm the CEO of Book of the Month. We're an e-commerce subscription service, and we do something very specific. Each month we promote 5 new books, primarily by emerging authors, and about 80% of the books we promote are actually written by women. In my career, I've done all sorts of crazy pivots, and happy to talk about that or Book of the Month.
We have some books for your book club up here.
I was going to say, we have 4. We just have to find one more, and we have your group for next month.
Perfect.
I'm Vanessa Liu. I'm a former scientist turned lawyer, turned media executive, turned founder of 2 companies, and now I oversee SAP's accelerators in North America, where we have a commitment to early stage entrepreneurs in enterprise tech, but 40% of the founders that we accelerate or fund are women and diverse entrepreneurs, and so I oversee that. I'm really excited to be here.
Wow.
Great. Well, I'm so excited to dig in. So I'm going to start with Amy. So you've built a career around helping women pivot. And can you talk about why that became your life's mission? And also tell us, do you think there's an age bias when we talk about being able to pivot?
Great question. So my desire, I guess, to be working with women who are pivoting came from my own, which I grew up kind of with a marketing degree, working in ad agencies, then started working in the NBA for the Phoenix Suns as their director of digital media and research. And one day got a phone call from the locker room, and they said, Amy Jo, can you come down and teach Shaquille O'Neal how to tweet? We don't know what that means. It was 2009, and so I went down, helped Shaq Berry, and realized I think I want to do my own thing. And it was interesting because I think sometimes we have a job where people think, oh, you're an attorney, you're an engineer, that's amazing. Why would you want to leave that? But the culture and the vibe and the pace just didn't really work for me. I was not happy. So that was the first pivot, and it really, being able to design your own day is pretty empowering. And then eventually kind of growing out of that, needing more purpose. And after exiting that, realizing, wow, what am I going to do next? Like, am I still relevant? And really leading from a place of purpose was the first time I had ever done that. And the more recent pivot of having my first child 3 months early, he was born, big surprise, and being in the NICU for 3 months was a forced pivot. And I think sometimes we're forced to pivot. Maybe you lose your job, or some sort of health challenge. And the truth is it's actually potentially the biggest asset you could have, that adversity, because it will give you such clarity. And as far as the age bias question, I mean, absolutely not. It's never too late. Look at what Amy Nelson has done in 36 months, right? She was an attorney and now an entrepreneur doing this. In my program for women, we have a 70-year-old and we have a 22-year-old.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool to see that diversity.
I was just thinking, I wish my daughter, who's going to stop by here today, actually could have heard about you teaching Shaq how to tweet. It's just awesome. That's great. A lot of pivots. All right, so Jen, next to you. I mean, best-selling author, 5 kids, so many things that you've done. I mean, how have all of those different businesses led to what you're doing today?
It's interesting when you sort of stay your hand at your career 15 years, coming up on 20 years. Fortunately, the good news is you are expected to pivot. So don't imagine for a moment that that is something to be afraid of, or that something's wrong with you, or that you picked poorly, or that you made the wrong decision. I can see, as I sort of chart my turns over the course of my career, that every single moment was meaningful, every one of them. And I brought something really important as a through line all the way to where I am now. I mentioned earlier that I primarily came up through a faith space. And so I wrote sort of faith-based books for women and taught in those sorts of live event settings, and began developing sort of in a container that made sense to me at the time. It's what I knew. It's what I had experienced thus far. And so I cut my teeth there and developed a few chops there, learned how to be a writer and other things. But as I got older, and just 1,000 things, I was exposed to a bigger world. My exposure to people changed. I grew up. My wisdom increased, and I started noticing that, I don't know if you know this, but religion has been used to disenfranchise people before. I don't know if you heard that. And I started to notice that a lot of the things that I held dear stayed: hope, grace, love, being a good neighbor, all the things that have kind of driven my life. But there were these other pieces that I realized I don't believe that anymore. I don't believe that was ever true. I find this to be disempowering. I find this to be disenfranchising. I see this keeping people out and down, and it's harmful, not just theology, but harmful practice. And so inside my own mind and heart and soul were my original pivots. And as I sort of I steered the ship into waters where I had never ventured, as an advocate, as an ally, as somebody who became really outspoken around policy and legislation, which I've been told many, many times, and maybe you have in your own way: stay in your lane. This is not what you do. This is not what we come to you for. And yet my conscience would not allow me to sit silent on it. So those pivots in a public way, and I have a pretty big community, then necessitated pivots in my career. I had books pulled out of print, pulled off shelves. It was a kind of an ugly response to my personal values. And so I really had to take a hard look at what I was doing and realize, well, I suppose if you are going to pull all my books off your shelves, I'm going to have to rethink the kind of books I write. And who is my audience, and where is my place, and where are my people? So I kind of found it kind of up through the channels of adversity. And to your really good point, Amy Jo, the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. I regret nothing. I am grateful for every minute. I would not change a single thing, because it brought me into what I now see is probably the rest of my life's work.
Thank you for that. One of the things that strikes me about what you said, and when I think about pivoting, and you're not sure, do you go left, do you go right, going back to that purpose and that through line, I think when people are scared to make that pivot, going back to your purpose and your why helps you to make that jump and to navigate. And I think that a lot of people don't take the time to go back and figure out that why. And I think when you take that time, it makes it easier to then pivot and pivot again and have that through line. So I loved what you both said. So Tiffany, who is sitting right next to me, in addition to founding an amazing organization called The Crew, wrote a best-selling book called Drop the Ball. And I will say, as many, there are men and women in here, but many women I know, and I will speak for myself, I have a hard time dropping the ball. I actually pride myself on juggling the balls. But your book gave me permission to drop them. So on behalf of all women, I want to thank you for that. And the question is, do you have to drop the ball to be able to then pivot? I mean, what is the connection there?
Yeah, so first I should say, I wrote a book called Drop the Ball because I used to be someone who was terrified of ever dropping a ball. That to me was the worst thing you could do. It meant that you were failing to take timely action, you were disappointing yourself, the people around you, your family. In my case, as dramatic as it might sound, I was disappointing the entire Black race, as if I mess this up, they were never going to hire a Black person ever again. I felt a lot of pressure to never drop a ball. What happened to me was not that I came up with some brilliant philosophy for dropping the ball. What happened was that I had a life-changing event. For me, it was the birth of my first child, but I've spoken with many women. It could be you finally got the promotion of your dreams and realized it's a lot harder to be the boss. It could be a diagnosis. It could be them pulling your books off of the shelf that caused you to kind of not be able to juggle or maintain this level of perfection. So for me, it's really about reappropriating the term. Dropping the ball for me now really is about releasing these unrealistic expectations that we all feel to keep all of those balls in the air to begin with. And I think it's important for pivoting because we're all, in general, kind of fulfilling other people's expectations of ourselves. And in order for you to pivot, you have to maintain enough courage and you have to take the kind of risks that if you can stop focusing on what the world expects you to be, but really try to center yourself on what matters most to you, your through line, your purpose, then you certainly can be free to be able to move into your full self. So that's why I think dropping the ball is really important. It's really dropping all of the negative talk and the inner critic that sometimes prevents us from just moving forward and doing it.
Let's do a session on that next year. All right, John, you are up. So you not only pivoted your career, but you pivoted an entire business into a brand new business model. So I'd love to know the challenges for both. One, your own career pivot, but then also your take on the challenge around pivoting a business.
Sure. Well, I would say, in my experience, what I do now, I take a lot of pride in the team that we built at Book of the Month and just the mission of promoting books by emerging authors and helping people discover books they love. I take a lot of pride in that. But what's interesting is 10 years ago, I would never have been able to say that this is my purpose. And it's not something that I knew I would seek. But as I just made pivots through my career, I made the best choices I could along the way. And when this opportunity presented itself, was something I grew into. And so another way of thinking about pivoting for me is that as you go through a career and you assess, do you stay at what you're doing or do you make a leap? You don't always know, and it's kind of okay if you don't know what your end goal is. And so that's something that has just been my experience is growing into something I feel very fortunate about. In terms of the business, I took this business over when it was about to go out of business, actually 93 years old. Book of the Month was started in 1926. Was a very important part of the book business for most of the 20th century, and then started declining through the aughts. Amazon kicked its teeth in, and at the same time it put out of business a lot of other bookstores and book chains. This business was about to die too. I happened to come into the opportunity to take it over. Most people thought I shouldn't have done it. People thought it was not doable to compete with Amazon, and people mostly thought, at the time, a lot of people thought books would become all ebooks. And I didn't think either of those were true. And I just felt, I'd always loved reading since I was a kid. I just felt that it would be a great opportunity to try. And so we shut the business down and started from scratch with a whole new model. And we're currently a subscription e-commerce service. We've been growing nicely. We have 150,000 active members, and we reach about 15 million readers each month through our paid and organic media programs.
That's amazing. So, Vanessa, we have many founders in the room today. And in your role, you're helping businesses, you're helping founders succeed as they enter entrepreneurship. So what advice would you give? I mean, during that crucial time, what can we learn from you?
Yeah, so the notion of a pivot is so synonymous with startups nowadays. Like, we work with startups that are typically seed to Series C, so we see a whole wide swath of companies. And what I do see, even in the short period of time we work with them, so we typically work with them very intensely for about a period of 3 to 4 months. Even from start to finish, we see them changing their business. Some of them go through very dramatic changes from a business model perspective. So I could think of one company that we worked with. It's a food waste management company started in Atlanta by an amazing founder named Jasmine Crowe. She's the CEO of Gooder. When she first came in, she was thinking, okay, I am going to charge corporates for taking away their excess food and tying them to the communities in need. And how do we do that at scale? She was just doing it one by one, really getting there. And what we were able to do was to help her think about, how do you scale that? I think that's the part where you as a founder need to think about, how do I need to change my business? It might be so different from the initial vision that you've started off with. And that's hard because it's really hard to let go of that. It's really hard to say, I actually need to go after a different customer base or go after that customer base in a very different way. I mean, in Jasmine's case, we opened her eyes to the notion of using channel partners. How about if people can sell on your behalf so that you can even reach like 20 customers at a time or 50 customers at a time instead of one at a time, which is consuming. And that's really hard because if you're thinking, I'm a very high touch consultative type of sale, what does that look like? And I think a lot of founders, they struggle with this in the beginning because when you have that first initial few customers, you want to be everything to everyone as well. So I have so many founders, I say, hey, what do you do? Let's just summarize it. They're like, well, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And that's not a scalable solution. It is hard to focus. It's hard to say no to certain areas so that you can enable yourself to grow. And those are the critical moments when we work with these companies.
So this could be for anyone here. Again, we have a lot of founders here. What advice would you give sort of your younger self if you were sitting out there today?
If you want something that you've never had before, you're going to have to do something you've never done before in order to get it.
I like it. Anybody else?
I would say it's always very important to know what your strengths are. And I think a lot of people don't spend enough time getting the feedback from their mentors, their peers, from people that they've worked with before, that they're friends, to say, hey, what is my superpower? Because you could use that to map that to your interests and really build something. Because so much of the time they might be like, well, I want to do this because I see someone else doing it. You should go from what is your strength?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to add to that too. I'm going to just jump right there and say, some of you have a pretty clear idea what your strength is, or at least you have a pretty clear idea what your dream is, maybe somewhere between the two. And I promise you that this is the truth, that I would be really sorry if you let imposter syndrome keep you sidelined. It's very real. You are not alone in it. I cannot tell you how many times every one of us has thought, this is ridiculous. Like, how dare I? Why should I do this? I am not as qualified as so-and-so. My work's already been done. My business has already been built. My idea's already been sold, right? Like, it's already been pitched. Well, maybe just take a little pressure off yourself and be like, yeah, it probably has been. You're probably not inventing the first new thing that's ever been done. So that's okay. Go ahead and let that one go. And it could be you. Why not you? Honestly, it could be you. And you are just as capable and just as qualified as anybody else. So it's this very weird set of goggles that we use when we look at our peers, when we look at our competitors, if that's how you see them, or your colleagues in your industry, and just think, well, they just have this so clearly figured out. They have a very well-developed team. Their business plan is probably beautiful. It's probably garbage, okay? It's probably just as good as yours. So why not you? There is a moment at the beginning that you just step in.
I feel like I'm getting a personal coaching session right now.
No, why not? Why not now?
I'm like,
Why not you?
I agree.
So I would just add to that, and with Lauren Perkins, who spoke earlier, build your network before you need your network. Invest in building relationships. We are all here together. At the end of this panel, instead of running away, meet the 3 people at your table, because that also will help you get to that next place. Which leads me to my question for Tiffany, which is, what is the role of community and networks in helping you pivot?
It's everything. I'm sitting here as the cumulative investment of a lot of people who poured themselves into me and made it possible for me to be here. People who were brought here in ships as cattle, the ones who made it here, who survived and thrived. They've paid the price for my success. For my parents who somehow got out of Watts and got up to Seattle, Washington. and raised me and instilled good values in me, from my mentors, from my sponsors like Marie C. Wilson, who built the Ms. Foundation for Women and started Take Our Daughters to Work Day, who said, "You're really smart and you work really hard. How about you work for me and I teach you a lot of things?" I think community, one, can help you with the feedback. I highly encourage all of you to do an exercise in which you ask people in your life who have known you in different contexts, different ages, can you share with me about a time when you experienced me at my best? And then shut up and let them pour, onto you. If you can record what they're saying, great. If you can transcribe it, print it all, put it on the floor, put it on tables, start circling words that are similar. You'll find that people have had a consistent experience with you that really sheds insight on your gifts, talents, skills, abilities. So I think serving as a mirror is the number one way that a community can really support you. And then the second way is to ensure that you've got people who can extend their emotional, their political, their economic, their social capital on your behalf in order to help you get the deal, in order to introduce you to the agent, in order to amplify your ideas. And so making sure that you've got a crew, that you've got people in your ecosystem to support you, but also people who are speaking their truth to you and serving as a mirror, I think are the two ways that community can make an impact.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us. Also, after recording more than 100 episodes, I've created a bit of a cheat sheet on the top 5 things I've learned from renegades and how they get from idea to action, from dreaming to doing. I will email you the downloadable PDF when you subscribe to my newsletter. Just head to amyjomartin.com and click on Connect with Me.
All right, so I want to pivot this conversation a little bit. So let's say we've all pivoted, we've taken a next step. What actionable advice can you give someone there who wants to make a change in their own life beyond that standard, believe in yourself? So you've made the pivot, now what? This is for anybody.
Well, and I think defining made the pivot, because I work with a lot of women who have made it in their mind, but maybe haven't actually taken action yet and just get started. We can spend so much time in our heads, and that redreaming is great, but with action comes clarity. And you just get started and get that feedback loop going, because you can date ideas, right? You can date multiple ideas and decide where you want to double down, because 99% of the time, it's all going to change anyway. So you just got to get going, get going.
Just do it.
I could say something about that. I think about a lot is just in a career perspective, I've found myself and people I've known along the way, a lot of times the decision people are trying to make is, should I stay in the job I'm in now, or should I move to some new thing? And it's a very hard decision, because you don't know what would happen if you stay in the lane. You don't know what would happen if you'd move. I think one thing that a lot of people underestimate is, or at least a lens that a lot of people don't use, is to think hard about which lane you'll learn the most in, just like either from a skills perspective, from a functional perspective, whether you'll be around people you can learn from, because these things tend to build on each other. And whenever I've been asked for advice, somebody will say, should I move this job? It may pay a little more, or it may pay a little less. My response is usually, well, wherever you think you can learn the most types of things that you are the most interested in, it can be very powerful over time, because you're sort of continuing to invest in yourself.
Agreed. Vanessa?
I think for me, if just for the founders out there, the first thing that I always tell founders to do is to come up with an advisory board of 3 to 5 people who are experts in areas that you know you're going to need help on. So it could be sales, it could be marketing, it could be product, it could be tech, it could be fundraising. And to get really seasoned people who have your back that you can just have a bat line to. Because so much of your journey is going to be very isolating, very lonely, but having this team that you can call upon and who can help you, the most successful founders that I know have utilized that incredibly well.
Almost like your own personal board of directors. Right? All right, next question's for Amy. In your Renegade Bootcamp, what do you find to be the most challenging part for your users to come to terms with? And tell us all, for those who aren't familiar with the Renegade Bootcamp, which sounds amazing and I'm dying to sign up, tell us a little bit about it and the perspective of the users.
Sure. So the Renegade Brand Bootcamp, it's a 3-month intensive where you are with like-minded and like-hearted women in similar places. And you're really learning how to articulate your brand essence, share your story, humanize in order to monetize, really. And that's through social media, public speaking. If podcasting is what you do, we have curriculum around that as well, book publishing, you name it. But what I find is there's so much internal work that happens when you start zoning in on the fact that you don't really brand yourself. You are yourself, and that creates a brand. Well, that means a lot of internal work has to happen. So that's what we focus on. As far as the biggest challenges, one of which is that you got to just cross over that starting line sometimes. And the imposter syndrome, right? The self-limiting beliefs. And we think, well, who am I to be going out and doing this? Do I have enough experience? Do I have enough XYZ? And sometimes those fresh eyes are exactly what create innovation, doing it differently. And you have that luxury of not knowing how it's been done before. And so really owning that and then surrounding yourself with advisors that can give you guardrails. The other thing is invest in yourself. So I once went to Mark Cuban and I said, I need some investment advice. And I thought he would say something about, a mutual fund or stock market or real estate. And he said, invest in yourself. Bet on yourself. It's not a gamble. Invest in yourself. And sometimes I think we have to give ourselves permission to actually spend against our own education and development.
Mm-hmm. And I do. I think as women, we all often put ourselves last on the list.
Yeah, absolutely.
From an investment perspective, for sure. I do hear that. Vanessa, question for you. So 11% of VCs are women, which I'm sure many of you here know, and 71% of VC firms have no female partners. So what do we think needs to happen for VCs to pivot toward women and other underrepresented minorities?
I've been thinking so much about this. So I think that there are 3 things that need to happen. First, obviously, the awareness of the numbers and the data out there. Let's look at women entrepreneurs. So there are over 12 million businesses founded by women here in the U.S. alone. I think the stat is that 1,800 new companies are started every day by women, which is incredible. But only 1.7% of these businesses generate revenue over $1 million. Which is really crazy. It's not because if it's a pipeline issue, it's a resourcing issue. If you take a look at other stats, there have been a lot of research done, and I'm sure many of you have seen it, that shows that companies that have at least one woman co-founder typically just return double the amount per dollar invested from a revenue perspective. So a lot of VCs are starting to wake up to this. But I think the second prong, which is really important, is that LPs have to be the ones who put the pressure on their GPs, so the ones who are running the VC firms, to say, hey, how diverse is your team? It's not okay to have an all-male team anymore. That's number one. And also number 2, a lot of LPs are starting, but this is still early, are now starting to ask for diversity metrics when it comes to the portfolio companies that are being invested in. I think that second prong is going to be probably the strongest change, barring quotas, which you will never be able to have, but pressure from LPs who do see this, who do see that there's like a tide when it comes to that is going to change. They can put pressure. But I think finally, just being able to surface all of the successes. I think there are so many successes that we can already point to, from Stitch Fix to Away. There's so many out there. I still hear those. So many investors saying, well, look at Theranos, which is incredible. I'm like, come on. But I think what we need to do is to really turn the conversation to the successes that there are in the marketplace. And there are a lot.
Right, so pushing that accountability down to those portfolio companies.
That's right.
And being willing to walk away.
Right.
I mean, I think that's part of it as well. So I want to, by show of hands, how many people here have a side hustle? Yeah, all right. Good number of people have a side hustle. So I would say in the digital age, I mean, having a side hustle is pretty easy if it's something that you want to do. But many people will ask me, and I'm sure ask many of you, well, how do I make my side hustle my job? My side hustle is my passion. How do I make it my job? And Jen, you've done that. I mean, there's not much you haven't done, but you've definitely done that. So can you talk a little bit about, for those that do have side hustles, how do we make them our full-time jobs?
I love that question too. And I love imagining all the side hustles that you are dreaming up and that you are laying awake at night thinking through. Those are so exciting. And so first of all, I would say definitely don't distrust your instincts. I feel like sometimes those dreams that kind of rise up in us, that maybe they go a little bit against the data points, or they don't have a real clear path to make sense in your life financially, or I still believe that our instincts are giving us those for a purpose. Like, pay attention to that, give that some credence, and listen to what your mind and soul is telling you. But I would just tell you, I could just really speak to it in my own life. I've had really interesting platforms to be able to do the work that I do. And so I'm thinking, and it's just so boring. I'm sure every single one of us has a podcast. But I remember thinking a couple of years ago, like, I have written 12 books. I am sick of myself. I don't know anything else, okay? I've told you people everything I know. There's nothing left. And so I am very curious now to sit across from somebody else. That is the next phase of my work. I am interested in highlighting other people's careers, other people's missions. I'm interested in furthering dialogue that matters. And so I turned to my team, and we are already at max capacity. I mean, let me just tell you, there is no margin. And I'm like, team, because I'm that big idea girl. And then I just have to hand it over to people and be like, is this possible? Do you know how to work the internet? Is this a thing that you can do? And so I turned to my team and said, I think I have a real capacity around a podcast in my way, with my community, in my style. Do you think we can try it? And they're like, do you think you can hire more people? And so we did it like really thin. We ran it lean, man, at the beginning, and we were just kind of throwing it against the wall to see if it would work. And so I created just enough margin for it to get it done. I didn't put too much pressure on it. So there is not one way to do this, but I do want to say it might be wise to not place too much emotional and financial pressure on your side hustle too soon. Like, let it breathe. Like, let it live. Let it grow a little bit. Let it get little baby legs before it's supposed to pay your mortgage. Because at that point, we squeeze it into submission, and sometimes we crush it and we ruin it. And so I let mine be as unimportant as I could, so that we could innovate, so that we could think through it a little bit differently, so we could really fail. Like, when I go back and listen to my first handful of podcasts, I want to slink onto the floor and die. No, don't listen. Don't do it. Promise. We had to learn. We had to develop our chops around it. We had to sort of figure out the logistics of it all. And so we let it breathe. And then, what do you know? It started working, and it started gaining a lot of traction, and it became like a really key part of just sort of a revenue stream. And so thus, I took my foot off the gas in a couple of other places and pressed it on the gas in that one. But it was sort of a timing issue, which I'm really grateful for now. Just so you know, I went dark in the hole financially on it for the first few months. So it was a risk, and we did take it. And my husband was like, I don't want to say this isn't working, but I pay the bills. And I'm like, right, just give me a few more months. And so it did take a nosedive for a minute before we could like pull it back up and gain airspeed again. And I'm so glad that we did. And so if you have the luxury of giving it a little bit of room to breathe and grow and develop, you might be surprised how your thing on the side becomes your thing in the center.
It's great.
I love that. And I also think by putting on the brakes a bit, I mean, resonated with some of what Vanessa was talking about. I mean, you may end up changing strategies and giving it a chance to move in different directions, setting aside, not breaking the bank or being able to feed your 5 children.
And play with it. Like let it be fun. If this is a pivot, I hope it's something you absolutely love and you should enjoy it. Enjoying that, knowing kind of when to let things happen versus make them happen, and forcing it can often send it into a different direction.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Gruer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time, and until then, why not now?